Pain has a taste. Did you know that? It tastes like copper, like an old penny you kept under your tongue too long. Dr. John Watson is tasting it right now. He's running. He's forgotten his revolver. He's forgotten his military training. He's forgotten everything except the primal need to put distance between himself and the thing behind him. The fog in Dartmoor isn't like London fog. It doesn't just obscure your vision, it eats it. It presses against your eyeballs like cold, wet wool. Watson stumbles. His hand slaps down into the muck, and the cold shoots up his arm like electricity. The ground here doesn't feel like earth. It feels like flesh, like pressing your palm against a sleeping animal's belly and feeling it rise. Behind him, the sound of pursuit, heavy, fast. 4 legs tearing through the peat. A beast, a massive beast. Watson trips, falls face first into the mud. His revolver flies from his hand and disappears into the darkness. He rolls onto his back, tries to crawl backward, but it's too late. The thing is here, 5 yards away, a silhouette in the fog, massive, hunched. Watson closes his eyes. He's a military doctor. He knows what comes next. Fangs, torn flesh, darkness. He waits for the strike. 1 second, 2, 3. The strike doesn't come. Watson opens his eyes, and he sees something his mind refuses to process. The silhouette in the fog is changing. The creature isn't attacking, it's rising. The shadow grows, stretches upward. The spine straightens with a crack that makes Watson's teeth ache. What was a wolf a second ago is now standing on 2 legs. It stands, and it stares down at him, motionless. Watson can't see the face, can't see the eyes. He can only see that the thing is trembling, like it's cold or in pain. And then, a sound. It's sniffing the air. Carefully, almost gently. Beasts don't sniff their prey before killing. Beasts don't stand upright to look you in the eye. Watson's hand finds cold metal in the mud. The revolver. The reaction is instant. The shadow jerks, folds in half, dropping back to the ground, and vanishes into the fog. Not running, flowing, like liquid. Watson is alone. He stares into the fog. He knows anatomy, he knows zoology, and he knows one thing. Dogs don't do that. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with Watson running through the fog. It starts 3 weeks earlier, in a cluttered office on Baker Street, with a man who didn't believe in ghosts. Sherlock Holmes took the case because he was bored. That's the truth. The great detective was rotting in his Baker Street apartment, pumping a 7% solution into his veins and staring at the ceiling like it held the answers to questions he'd forgotten how to ask. When the letter arrived, a rambling, terrified note from a country doctor named James Mortimer, claiming that Sir Charles Baskerville had died of fright on the moors and that his heir, Sir Henry, was in mortal danger, Holmes practically leaped at it. Watson went because Watson always went, because someone had to keep Holmes from getting himself killed. Dr. Mortimer was a tall, thin man with the kind of nervous energy that made you want to take a step back. He sat in Holmes's chair, wringing his hands, and told them the story. The Baskerville family, he said, was cursed. Centuries ago, a man named Hugo Baskerville, a drunk, a rapist, a monster in human skin, had chased a young woman across the moors. He'd caught her, dragged her into the old abbey ruins, and when he was done, when he stumbled out into the moonlight, something else was waiting for him. The locals found Hugo's body the next morning, his throat torn out, his face frozen in a scream. His eyes were gone, plucked clean from the sockets, and standing over him was a hound, a massive black beast with eyes like coals. The legend said the hound would return, that it would hunt every Baskerville heir until the bloodline was extinct. Holmes, of course, didn't believe a word of it. Superstition, he said, a convenient excuse for murder. But Mortimer wasn't finished. Sir Charles Baskerville, he said, had died 3 months ago. They'd found him on the moor path, his face twisted in terror, his heart stopped. And beside his body, in the soft earth, were footprints, paw prints, massive, clawed. "But here's the thing, Mr. Holmes," Mortimer whispered. "The prints, they didn't lead away. They just stopped, like whatever made them vanished into thin air." Holmes leaned forward. "And the heir?" "Sir Henry Baskerville. He's arriving from Canada next week. He doesn't know about the curse. He doesn't know about the danger." Holmes smiled. "Then we'll have to tell him." They met Sir Henry at his hotel. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had a Canadian accent and a firm handshake. He also had the eyes of a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "Gentlemen," he said, pouring himself a whiskey with shaking hands, "Dr. Mortimer has told me about the legend. I'll be honest, I don't believe in curses, but I do believe in family, and Baskerville Hall is my family's home. I won't be scared away by ghost stories." Holmes studied him. "You've been to the hall before?" Henry's jaw tightened. "Once, years ago, when I was a boy. My father brought me. We stayed for a summer." "And?" Henry drained his glass. "And I swore I'd never go back." But he did go back, because grief does things to people. It hollows them out. It scoops out everything soft and human and leaves behind something desperate, something hungry. Baskerville Hall was wrong. Watson noticed it the moment they arrived. The house was a sprawling Gothic monstrosity, all stone and shadow, crouched on the edge of the moor like a predator waiting to pounce. But it wasn't the architecture that bothered him. It was the smell. Not the mustiness of an old manor. This was something else, something biological, like a butcher's shop where the freezer broke 3 days ago. "Holmes," Watson said, his hand drifting to the revolver in his coat. "Do you smell that?" Holmes didn't answer. He was staring at the walls. The walls were breathing. Sir Henry greeted them in the parlor. He looked worse than he had in London, eyes sunken, skin the color of old paper, hands trembling as he poured tea. "Gentlemen," he said, and his voice was a ruin, "welcome to Baskerville Hall. I apologize for the atmosphere. The house has been closed for some time. The staff, they don't like to stay." "Why not?" Watson asked. Henry's cup rattled against the saucer. "The locals are superstitious. They hear things at night, howling, scratching. They think the moor is haunted." Holmes leaned forward. "And what do you think, Sir Henry?" Henry met his gaze. "I think the moor is dangerous, but not supernatural. There are wild dogs out there, escaped convicts, plenty of rational explanations." "Then why do you look so frightened?" Henry's face went white. "I'm not frightened, Mr. Holmes. I'm tired. Tired of this place. Tired of the questions. Tired of people looking at me like I'm hiding something." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Are you?" Henry stood up abruptly. "I think you should rest, gentlemen. Dinner will be at 8. He left the room without another word. Watson looked at Holmes. "He's lying." Holmes nodded. "Yes. The question is, what is he lying about?" That evening, While Holmes claimed he needed to review the case files, Watson decided to visit the local pub. The Hound's Head was a squat stone building at the edge of the village with low ceilings and a fireplace that belched smoke into the room. The locals were there, farmers, shepherds, men with weathered faces and suspicious eyes. When Watson walked in, the conversation stopped. Every head turned. Watson ordered a pint and sat at the bar. The bartender, a thick-necked man with a scar across his cheek, poured the drink in silence. "You're staying at the hall," the bartender said. It wasn't a question. "I am." The bartender leaned in. "Then you should leave." Watson frowned. "Why?" The bartender glanced at the other men. They were watching, listening. "Because Sir Henry, he's not right." An old man at the corner table, drunk, his face red and bloated, laughed bitterly. "Not right? That's putting it kindly, Tom." The bartender shot him a warning look. "Shut it, Davy." But Davy didn't shut it. "Sir Henry buys meat," Davy said, his voice slurred. "Buys it by the sack, from the butcher, every week. Mutton, beef, sometimes pork. Enough to feed a family of 10. "But he lives alone," another man added quietly. Davy leaned forward, his eyes glassy. "My dog went missing last month. Big shepherd, strong as an ox. Found him 3 days later, near the hall, crushed, ribs caved in, like someone hugged him to death." Watson felt a chill. "What are you saying?" Davy's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Meyer took his boy, you know. Years ago. Little Thomas. Drowned in the bog. They found the body. But Sir Henry, he didn't bury it. Not right away. He took it somewhere. And when he came back, he wasn't alone." The bartender slammed his hand on the bar. "That's enough, Davy! You're drunk!" Davy laughed. "Drunk? Maybe. But I'm not blind. I've seen the lights at night. Coming from the old groundskeeper's cottage, I've heard the sounds, crying, screaming. And I've seen Sir Henry walking across the moor at midnight, carrying sacks, heavy sacks." Watson stood up. "Thank you for the drink." He left the pub. But as he walked back to the hall, he couldn't shake the feeling that the entire village knew something, and they were too terrified to say it out loud. Watson couldn't sleep. The room was cold. Too cold. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're already dead. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house. And the house was listening back. At first it was just the usual sounds, creaking floorboards, wind rattling the windows, the distant hoot of an owl. But then he heard something else. Scratching. Low, rhythmic, like claws dragging across stone. Watson sat up. His heart was pounding. He reached for his revolver, then remembered he'd left it in his coat downstairs. Stupid. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a sound. Wet, guttural, like someone trying to breathe through a collapsed lung. It was coming from below. Watson got out of bed. He pulled on his trousers, lit a candle, and crept into the hallway. The house was a maze of corridors and staircases. He followed the sound down, 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 until he reached a narrow stone staircase that led to the basement. The door at the bottom was heavy, oak, reinforced with iron bands, and the handle was turning. From the inside. Watson froze. Dogs don't open doors. The handle turned slowly, like something, was learning how to use it. The latch clicked. The door creaked open an inch. Watson saw darkness, and in the darkness, something moved. something tall, hunched. And then, 2 points of light, pale, reflective, like animal eyes catching the candlelight. But the height was wrong, too high for a dog, too low for a man. Watson's breath caught in his throat. "Dr. Watson!" Watson spun around. Sir Henry stood at the top of the stairs, holding a candle. His face was white, his eyes were wild. "What are you doing down here?" Watson's mouth was dry. "I heard something." Henry descended the stairs quickly, his boots echoing. He grabbed Watson by the shoulder, hard, and pulled him away from the door. "You shouldn't be here," Henry said. His voice was shaking. "The foundation is unstable. Rats, big ones, dangerous." Watson looked at the door. It was closed now. "Sir Henry." "Please, doctor." Henry's grip tightened. His fingers dug into Watson's shoulder like claws. "Go back to bed. I'll have the groundskeeper set traps in the morning." Watson didn't believe him, but he didn't ask questions. Because some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. As Henry led him back upstairs, Watson glanced over his shoulder, and he saw it, just for a second, a shadow behind the door, tall, swaying, and those 2 pale points of light watching him through the crack. The next morning, Holmes announced his plan. He would return to London to pursue other leads. Watson would remain at Baskerville Hall to keep an eye on Sir Henry. Watson protested, but Holmes was insistent. "Someone needs to stay close to him, Watson, and you're better suited for the role. You're a doctor, a companion. He'll trust you." So Watson stayed, and Holmes disappeared. The days passed slowly. Watson accompanied Sir Henry on walks across the moor, keeping his revolver close. They saw nothing unusual, just endless stretches of gray grass and black water, the occasional sheep, the distant silhouette of a tor. But at night, Watson heard the sounds again, scratching, whimpering, the wet, guttural breathing, and every night, Sir Henry would intercept him before he could investigate. "Just the wind, doctor, just the pipes, just your imagination." Watson didn't believe him. "Let me tell you about Grimpen Mire. The locals don't call it that. The locals don't call it anything at all, because the locals don't talk about it. Not in the pubs, not in the churches, not even in their own homes with the doors locked and the curtains drawn. Some places are so wrong that even naming them feels like an invitation. But if you pressed them, if you got enough whiskey in them and caught them in that gray hour between midnight and dawn, they might call it the sour ground. The mire isn't a swamp. A swamp is just water and mud and rotting plants. The mire is a mouth. It's been swallowing things for centuries: sheep, cattle, travelers who wandered too far from the path. And here's the thing about mouths. They don't just take. Sometimes they spit things back up. The old stories, the ones that predate Christianity, the ones the missionaries tried to burn out of the local memory, talk about the mire as a doorway. Not to hell. Hell would be too simple, too clean. The mire leads somewhere older, somewhere that existed before God said, "Let there be light," and something in the darkness said, "No." If you bury something in the sour ground, it comes back, but it comes back wrong. Sir Henry Baskerville knew the stories. His family had lived in the shadow of the mire for 12 generations. Henry swore he'd never be like them. He was a modern man. He lived in Canada. He built fences. He believed in sweat and lumber and the dollar bill. Then his son died. Thomas, 7 years old, hair like copper wire, laugh like church bells. It happened on a summer afternoon. Henry had brought the boy to Baskerville Hall for a visit. Just the two of them. A father-son trip. They were walking along the edge of the mire, looking for butterflies. Thomas loved butterflies. Henry turned away for just a moment. He was fixing a fence post, or checking his watch, or lighting a cigarette. It doesn't matter. What matters is that when he looked back, Thomas was gone. Henry called his name. No answer. Then he heard it. A scream, high-pitched, terrified, cut off abruptly. Henry ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run in his life. His boots sank into the soft ground. The fog was thick. He couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. "Thomas! Thomas!" He found the spot, a patch of black water, still, silent, and floating on the surface, a small wooden toy, a tin soldier, Thomas's favorite. Henry waded in. The water was cold. It pulled at his legs like hands. He dove, again and again. On the fourth dive, his fingers brushed something soft. He pulled Thomas out. The boy was limp. His lips were blue. His eyes were closed. Henry tried everything, pressed on his chest, breathed into his mouth, screamed at him to wake up. But Thomas didn't wake up. The mire had taken him. Henry carried the body back to the hall. He laid Thomas on the bed. He sat beside him for hours, just staring. And here's the thing. Thomas looked perfect. The peat in the water had preserved him. His skin was pale but intact. His face was peaceful. His hands were folded on his chest, like someone had laid him out to sleep. Henry couldn't bury him. He looked too alive. So Henry started looking for a way to wake him up. He found an old book in the hall's library, a journal written by one of his ancestors. It talked about the mire, about the sour ground, about rituals. If you bury the dead in the old place, they come back, but they come back changed, hungry, wrong. Henry didn't care. He took Thomas's body to the mire. He found the spot, a clearing where nothing grew, where the ground was black and slick like an open wound. He dug. The earth came up easy, too easy, and it was warm, body temperature warm. He laid his son in the hole, and he waited. 3 days later, Thomas came home. But Thomas didn't come back alone. Something else rode in with him, wearing his face like a mask that didn't quite fit. Something old, something that remembered what it was like to hunt. Henry didn't care. His son was back, and a father protects his son, no matter what he eats. Watson didn't know any of this yet. All he knew was that Sir Henry was hiding something, and that something was in the basement. Then, one afternoon, Watson decided to investigate on his own. He waited until Sir Henry left the hall, claiming he needed to visit the village, and then Watson went looking. He found a map in Henry's study, a hand-drawn map of the moor, and on it, marked with a red X, was a location labeled J.S.-Old Tin Mine, J.S. Jack Stapleton. Watson remembered the name. The naturalist, the man who'd sent the original letter to Holmes, the man who'd disappeared 3 weeks ago. Watson grabbed his coat and his revolver, and he went to find the mine. The old tin mine was a wound in the earth, a gaping hole surrounded by rusted equipment and rotting timbers. Watson descended carefully, his boots slipping on the wet stone. At the bottom, he found a makeshift laboratory. It wasn't a place of creation, it was a place of observation. Telescopes pointed at Baskerville Hall, notebooks filled with meticulous handwriting, sketches of something that looked like a dog, but wasn't. The drawings were frantic, obsessive, pages and pages of the same figure drawn from different angles, 4 legs, then 2, a snout, then a face, claws, then fingers. And on the desk, open to the last page, was a journal. Watson picked it up. His hands were shaking. He read, October 4th, 1889. Subject 0 exhibits rapid cellular decay in extremities, hair growth uneven, patchy. Joints hyperextend beyond normal human range. Baskerville refuses termination, claims paternal attachment. I fear I have made a terrible mistake in helping him perform the ritual. October 9th. Subject 0 attempting vocalization. Repeats single syllable, unclear if memory or mimicry. Baskerville insists it knows him. Subject exhibits behavior inconsistent with animal intelligence. This morning, I found it arranging stones in the cellar. Patterns, deliberate patterns. October 12th. Found drawings on the floor of the cellar. Crude, childlike, stick figures, a house, a man. Subject 0 made them, with its claws. Baskerville wept when he saw them. He said, he remembers home. October 14th. I'm leaving. The specimen, the word specimen was scratched out violently, the pen tearing through the paper. The thing is growing stronger. It killed a sheep last night. Didn't eat it, crushed it, held it too tight, like a child hugging a doll. Baskerville says the ground gave him back, but the ground doesn't give. It only trades. I can hear it at night, calling. I'm leaving tonight. If you're reading this, don't go to the hall. Don't try to help Baskerville. It's too late for him. October 16th. I tried to leave. It followed me. I can hear it outside the mine, scratching, whimpering. It sounds like… The entry ended there. Watson closed the journal. His throat was tight. Something fell out from between the pages. Watson bent down and picked it up. It was a toy. A small tin soldier, painted red and blue. The paint was chipped. One arm was missing. The same toy Henry had described in his journal. Thomas's toy. Watson stared at it. His hands were trembling. Holmes, he whispered to the empty room. This was a child. And then he heard it. A sound. From deeper in the mine. Breathing. Wet. Ragged. Watson drew his revolver. Who's there? The breathing stopped. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Coming closer. Watson backed toward the entrance. His revolver was raised. His heart was hammering. I'm armed, he called out. Show yourself. The footsteps stopped. Watson's candle flickered, and then it went out. Darkness. Complete. Absolute. Watson fumbled for matches. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped the box. It clattered to the ground, and in the darkness, he heard it. A voice, high-pitched, childlike, but wrong, like vocal cords that had forgotten how to form words. Why? Watson froze. Why what? Why did you leave me? Watson's blood turned to ice. I didn't leave you. I don't know you. A sound, closer now, the scrape of claws on stone. Liar. Everyone leaves. Daddy says they're bad. Daddy says I have to protect him. Watson fired. The muzzle flash lit up the tunnel for a split second, and Watson saw it. A figure, tall, hunched, skin pale and stretched tight over elongated bones, limbs too long, joints bending backward, and a face, half human, half something else. One eye blue and clear, the other milky white and dead. The darkness returned. Watson ran. He ran blindly, his hands scraping against the wet stone walls. Behind him, He heard the thing following, not running, loping, on all fours, the sound of claws on stone, getting closer. Watson saw light ahead, the entrance. He burst out of the mine and into the gray afternoon light. He spun around, raising his revolver. The entrance was dark, silent. And then, from deep within the mine, a sound. A child's voice, singing, off-key, broken. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Watson backed away. He didn't stop until he was 100 yards from the mine, and even then, he could still hear it. "How I wonder what you are." Watson ran back to the hall. He found Holmes waiting for him in the study. "Holmes," Watson gasped. "I found Stapleton's journal. I saw—" "I know," Holmes said quietly. He was standing by the window, staring out at the moor. "I've been watching the hall for the past week, from the stone hut on the tor. I've seen Sir Henry. I've seen what he's hiding." Watson sank into a chair. "Then you know?" "Yes." "What do we do?" Holmes turned. His face was pale. His eyes were hard. "We end it." They found Stapleton's body the next morning. He was lying in the mire, half submerged in black water, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. Holmes knelt beside the corpse. Watson joined him. Stapleton's chest was caved in. His ribs were shattered, driven inward like someone had taken a sledgehammer to his sternum. But there was no blood, just bruises. Holmes examined the body in silence. His hands moved methodically, checking the neck, the arms, the legs. But Watson could see the tremor in his fingers. Finally, Holmes spoke. "Stapleton was conducting biological experiments," Holmes said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was trying to convince himself. "Crossbreeding, a gorilla perhaps, or a mastiff with enhanced musculature. Illegal, but not impossible. He must have lost control of the specimen. It escaped, killed him." Watson stared at him. "Holmes, it's the only logical explanation, Watson. Stapleton was a naturalist. He had access to exotic animals. He could have—" "Holmes." Watson pointed at the bruises on Stapleton's chest. "Look at the marks." Holmes looked. They were handprints. Small, delicate, 5 fingers on each side, pressed into the flesh with enough force to crack bone. "These are human," Watson said quietly. "Human fingers. A child's fingers. But the pressure, Holmes. No human being could generate this force. No child, no man, and no ape has hands this small." Holmes stared at the marks. His jaw tightened. Then, "A child?" Watson's voice cracked. "A child with the strength of a hydraulic press. A child that shouldn't be alive. A child that drowned in the mire 3 years ago." Holmes stood up. He turned away from the body, his hands clenched into fists. When he spoke again, his voice was cold, distant. "Then we are dealing with something beyond my methods." It was the first time Watson had ever heard Sherlock Holmes admit defeat, and it terrified him more than the corpse. "What do we do?" Watson asked. Holmes was silent for a long moment. Then, "We find Sir Henry, and we end this, tonight." They tracked Sir Henry to the old groundskeeper's cottage on the edge of the mire. The smell here was unbearable. Ammonia, rot, and something sweet. Henry had tried to mask the scent of death with lavender water. It didn't work. Henry was sitting in a rocking chair, facing a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. He didn't turn around when they entered. "You shouldn't be here," Henry said. His voice was flat, empty. "Sir Henry," Holmes said, drawing his revolver, "open the door. I can't. Why not? Because he's hungry. And when he's hungry, he doesn't recognize me. Watson stepped forward. What have you done? Henry turned. His eyes were red, wet, totally insane. I saved him, Henry whispered. I brought him back. My Thomas. The mire. It gave him back. From behind the door, a sound, wet, guttural, and then a voice, high-pitched, childlike. Daddy? Who's that? Are they bad men? Watson's blood turned to ice. It's okay, Tommy, Henry whispered to the door. Just visitors. Daddy will make them go away. Holmes's voice was cold, sharp as steel. That is not your son. That is a husk, a shell filled with whatever filth lives in that swamp. Liar! Henry screamed. He stood up, his chair clattering backward. He remembers his toys. He remembers his songs. He remembers me. And what does he eat, Henry? Holmes stepped closer. What does he eat? Henry slumped. His voice broke. He needs life. Sheep didn't work. The meat, it has to be fresh. It has to be aware. I tried to stop. I tried to starve him, but he cried. He cried and begged, and I couldn't let him suffer. Watson felt sick. You've been feeding him people. Drifters, Henry whispered. Travelers. People no one would miss. I won't let him starve. I won't let you kill him again. Henry grabbed a lever on the wall, the locking mechanism. I'm sorry, Henry said, and he pulled it. The door swung open. It stepped into the light. It had been a boy once. You could see the geometry of a child in the skeleton, the small rib cage, the delicate wrists, the narrow shoulders. But the mire had added to it. The limbs were stretched. The skin was pale and tight, like a drumhead pulled too far. The joints bent backward. The fingers were too long, tipped with black nails that curved like claws. It walked on all fours, but the movement was wrong. Jerky, disjointed, like a puppet with tangled strings. The face. God, the face. One side was Thomas, a 7-year-old boy with pale blue eyes and a dusting of freckles across the nose. The other side was a sliding avalanche of tumorous flesh and teeth. The mouth was too wide, the jaw unhinged like a snake's. Thomas, Henry wept. He opened his arms. It's okay. Daddy's here. The creature tilted its head. The human eye blinked. The monster eye stared. Daddy, it crooned. Its voice was wet, thick, like speaking through a mouthful of mud. Hungry. So hungry. It hurts. Holmes raised his revolver. Don't, Watson said, grabbing his arm. Bullets won't work. I shot it in the mine. It didn't even slow down. Then what do we… The creature moved. It didn't attack Holmes. It didn't attack Watson. It lunged at Henry. It hit him with the force of a freight train. They went down in a tangle of limbs. But it wasn't fighting him. It was hugging him. It wrapped those long, wrong arms around Henry's chest and squeezed. Watson heard the ribs crack. Pop. Splinter. Love you, Daddy, the thing gurgled. Love you so much. Don't leave. Don't leave me again. Henry's face went white. Blood bubbled from his mouth. His eyes bulged. But he was smiling. I love you too, Henry gasped. I promise. I won't leave you. Never again. Henry Baskerville died in the arms of the thing he made. The creature held him for a long moment, nuzzling the dead face with its wet snout, making soft, keening sounds. Then, slowly, it looked up. It looked at Holmes, at Watson, and in that moment, the monster was gone. Only the boy remained. The human eye wept. A single tear rolled down the pale cheek. "Please," the creature whispered. Its voice was small, broken. "It hurts. The dirt, it burns inside me. I can feel it, moving, growing. I don't want to be hungry anymore. I don't want to hurt people. Please, make it stop." Holmes lowered his revolver. He looked at Watson. Watson nodded. Holmes picked up a kerosene lantern from the table. He looked at the creature. "Will it hurt?" the creature asked. Holmes's voice was gentle. "Not for long," the creature nodded. It hugged its father's corpse tighter. "Tell Mummy I'm sorry," it said. "Tell her I tried to be good." Holmes threw the lantern. They stood outside and watched the cottage burn. The flames rose high into the night sky, turning the fog orange and red. Watson thought he heard screaming, but it might have been the wind. They told the police it was a gas leak. Sir Henry Baskerville died in a tragic fire at the old groundskeeper's cottage. The body was too badly burned to identify. The Hound was never found. That's the lie we tell to keep the world sane, to keep the darkness at the edge of the map. Watson tried to write it down. He wanted to make it a story, a mystery. The Hound of the Baskervilles. A nice, tidy tale with a dog in a mask and a greedy inheritance scheme. He published the lie, because the truth would break people. Holmes never spoke of it, but he changed. He started checking the locks 3 times before bed. He stopped sleeping without a light, and he never, ever went back to the country. And the mire? The mire is still there. You can drain a swamp, but you can't drain the sour ground. It goes down too deep, down to the rock, down to the hell below the rock. It's patient. It can wait. It waits for the next grieving father, the next lonely widow, the next person who stands at a grave and thinks, "It's not fair. I would do anything." Because grief is a door, and the mire is the thing knocking on the other side. The ground is sour, but the hunger is sweet. And sometimes, dead is better.